Hi, this is Lainey, and I'm here on our educational videos of worm composting with Lainey and Bill to share a little bit about our motivation and our philosophy of worm composting with you all today. So I'm standing here at our home garden in Sebastopol, California, with a small worm bin that we're going to be setting up and walking through with our viewers how to get it going, how to feed it, how to maintain your small worm composting operation. And then we also have some larger worm bins on the property that have been set up and going for about 8 years now. So you can get a sense of the scale and the possibility here with worm composting. So many things are possible. So before we get into the specifics, we're gonna do an overview of our philosophy and why we're doing this, why we're making these videos. So Bill, do you want to share a little bit about our approach to worm composting and what our viewers should expect if they get into this kind of project?
Absolutely, it's such a delight. And we should say, as we've talked among ourselves, that we're encouraging community science. We're going to tell people a number of things, but you shouldn't take our word as absolute final. That they're just think about it, be inquisitive, be skeptical about things you hear, and check things out yourself.
Yeah, we highly encourage observation and learning from what you are seeing and not just learning from what we are saying to you. We're also observing and looking at our pile and making adjustments as needed when we do that.
So having said that, yeah, worm composting, there's nothing better. It produces what's called black gold. We'll show you in later episodes the final product, which is just amazingly beautiful soil and wonderful for the garden. And the worms are magic. They're not magic. They have a wonderful digestive system where we can feed them these food scraps, which maybe you would be composting other ways. There are other means of composting. But feeding the worms, then what they do is through their digestive system, they take in the kitchen scraps through their digestive system and poop out what's called worm castings. And that's the finished product. That's the soil, which you might think, yuck, we're starting with all this yucky kitchen scraps and this is going to turn out to be gold and aromatic. Yes, it's true. So kitchen scraps to
gold.
To gold.
Yeah, so that's the kind of the main motivation, is that you can take a waste product and turn it into something super valuable for your garden or for your neighborhood garden or an urban farm community garden plot. And the main challenges that you're just looking out for are making sure critters don't get into your worm bin, making sure it stays ideally in a cool, dry place so it doesn't get too hot. Like, you don't want it baking out in the sun. You don't want it to get too wet or too dry, so you're observing for those signs in your worm bin. And of course, you don't want it to get smelly. So there are just adjustments that you can make as you observe, and the outcome is just so great. And there's so many ways of getting to a positive outcome. So we are not prescribing the gospel of worm composting as much as encouraging community science and learning. So get some neighbors together, get some family members even at a distance to start their own worm bin and you start yours, and you can check in with each other, kind of like the sourdough baking craze right now. You can say, how's your worm bin doing? Like, what have you noticed? What are you covering the food scraps with to control odor? And just learn and enjoy the process.
And just one final thing you do mention, as we have the emphasis on food scraps and producing beautiful final product. So this is another thing to ask a question, because you may hear other people with a different approach. Somebody else may have the approach, I just want to propagate as many worms as possible. So you might use something different. You might not even use food scraps. But that's a different proposition. Worms can still do different things, and you can create an environment that maximizes reproduction, or our emphasis is on processing the food scraps and making a beautiful final product. And we do propagate a bunch of worms in the process.
We do. And Bill, can you tell us a little bit more about how quickly the worms can be expected to reproduce and sort of how they do that?
Sure. Well, and this is so interesting because, again, to think about the variables. If we put two worms in this box, and we know that they're hermaphrodites, so they each have the male and female part. So each one, the male on one part fertilizes the female part, so the sperm fertilizes the eggs, and then the other partner does the same thing back. So it's a wonderful reciprocal relationship. But if they're just two worms in this box, it's going to take them months to find each other.
That's true.
So that's going to reproduce very slowly. So that's something to take into account. In the beginning, maybe we have less density than we have later. So to say they're going to be X number of new worms in X time, no, there are a lot of variables. But having said that, so I mentioned how they reproduce, and they will, so when they fertilize, then the fertilized part is a little ring, and we'll demonstrate that in future. So there's a little ring around the worm.
Yeah.
And then that ring works towards the head and drops off. And in that ring is a little cocoon. In that cocoon are 2 to 7 worms. So the average, they say the average live worm production by that one fertilization is 3. And the worms will go through that cycle every 45 to 60 days. They say another figure that you'll hear, which seems reliable, is that they will reproduce themselves 4 times within a 60 to 90 day period.
Okay.
So again, using rough figures, there are lots of variables, but let's say 90 days. So that would mean that one worm, three offspring every 90 days. That'd be 12 offsprings. So that would then increase 12 times over the course of a year.
Yeah, so that, I mean, you can do the math. If you start with 100 worms, you're going to have upwards of 1,000 after a period of half a year to a year, depending on how quickly they find each other and how quickly they then reproduce. So that is the goal. You can monitor for population size. You can see the rings forming on your worms, and you can use all of that to decide, okay, do I have too many worms in here, too few? Should I slow down my feeding? Should I speed it up? And go from there.
And maybe a final word, since you mentioned all those things, we don't want to scare people. Those variables are present, but you have a pretty good margin of error. We've talked about having the right balance. Well, it doesn't have to be absolutely precise. We'll give you a range and an understanding, and if you keep things within that range, you'll be okay.
Yes, so we encourage you to post comments on our videos and subscribe to our channel and vermicompost along with us and along with your community members in these coming months. Thank you for watching.